Greetings to you. Some of you have contacted me this week that you're reading the book of Matthew. I wish I had bought those gold stars I promised, but I will give you at least credit for doing that this week if you've had the opportunity. Matthew's a bit of a long read, but what a great opportunity to just immerse yourself in Matthew's story of Jesus and especially about how to learn of Jesus. This coming week, we're going to look at the Gospel of Mark. Mark is an easier read for you. It is the shortest, I think, of the Gospels. It is the first Gospel, the earliest Gospel. In fact, when I work with people who are wanting to learn more about Jesus, where do I go? How do I study? I always send them first to the book of Mark. I believe it's a great place to start. It's the first source we had about Jesus and his story. It's the first full storytelling of Jesus. So we will look at that on Sunday. We're going to look at the story of blind Bartimaeus as kind of a centerpiece of Mark's message. I've sent that to you in the email, and you can look at that text in Mark chapter 8 this week. It's not long. But I'm sort of using it as a reference for the overall story that Mark is trying to tell when we read his gospel about what it means for us to not be able to see, to not understand, but then to allow Jesus to help us to see, where we suddenly get what it is he's trying to teach and say. I doubt some of this makes the sermon on Sundays, but I thought it would be helpful for you just to have a little overview of the book of Mark. Certainly the book of Mark is covering an era from 30 AD and really speaking to a people who are around 60, 65 AD, even 70 AD. A lot has happened in that time period. I was kind of studying over some of the things that went on there as he sketches his story. The crucifixion is certainly where Mark is taking us, but he's trying to encourage the people of Jesus, the Jesus followers, about what's next. And he's asking them questions, really, about what will you do with this Jesus? Now that he's done what he said he would do, what will you do? It's a terrible time, from Herod to Nero in that time frame was a rough time for people who would be Christians. They were tolerated at first. Then they became alarmed at how the government was speaking to them and working against them. Then they were persecuted. That persecution was where people were killed and imprisoned for following Jesus. The disciples themselves, many of them were executed in this time frame where stories were passed about certainly Peter and James and John and even Paul, who the author of this gospel worked with. Mark was connected to Paul's work, was a cousin of Barnabas, went with him on his first missionary journey. Somehow he and Paul got crossways and he didn't go back with him on his journeys, but we find that as Paul is writing his letter in prison to the Colossians, he writes that John Mark is there with him. So whatever happened to them, they apparently made it up, and Mark hung out with him afterward. Something I would have you to know about the form of Mark, it's realistic, it's vivid, it's rapid. Mark uses a very simple Greek language that we use to translate Mark. It's a very basic and quick gospel. You're not going to get a lot of nuances with Mark. You're going to get the story and you're going to get it quickly. The divine side of Jesus is emphasized in Mark. Mark wants you to know that there's something holy and special about him, and yet you also get this human portrayal of Jesus. It's in Mark that we find some interesting writing there where Jesus is described in very vivid and clear details, the look of his eyes, his facial expressions, his tone of speech. Mark is the one who really pulls all of that out. So, read the text and know that I'm going to ask you to read Mark soon. I hope to see you Sunday, and we'll do a holy book review of the book of Mark in the sermon, and I hope to see you there.